Over the last 7 years, I have tried every kind of marketing you can possibly imagine for my business. And I have determined over that time that direct mail has been by far the most profitable marketing channel I have ever tried. And I've spent over $1 million just testing it out, figuring out what works and figuring out what doesn't. And through that time, I've been able to generate over 100 deals per year in my business using direct mail. And now I've created a very small but very powerful mini course on how I utilize direct mail in my business. It explains everything I do from A to Z, and I've made this available to you absolutely free. That's right, no charge, no obligations. Just go to my website, MikeSimmons.com/winning direct mail. MikeSimmons.com/winning direct mail to find out how you can implement my system in your business and start generating more leads through direct mail. Go check it out. It's absolutely free. I can't wait for you to try it.
All these changes happen in like a 2-year period. And so there's been more volatility in that online marketing space than I've ever seen in my entire life.
You're listening to the Just Start Real Estate Podcast. If you're serious about your real estate investing business and need real answers, you are in the right place. And now, your host, Mike Simmons.
All right, thank you for joining me on Just Start Real Estate. I appreciate you guys being here. If you're getting anything out of this, I always ask you to give me a rating and review, but I'm going to amend that. I know that for some of you who haven't done it yet, a rating and review sounds like a lot of work, right? You got to think of something to say, you got to come up with a rating, and like, how do you, I don't want to think of something to say. I got one easier for you. If you're listening in Apple, iTunes or Apple Podcasts, I should say. If you're listening through Apple Podcasts or if you're listening through Spotify or something else, just click on the subscribe button. That's all I ask. Just click the subscribe button. It helps me out immensely. I think it may help out even more than a rating and review, and it's so much easier. Just go onto your little device that you're listening to now. Most of you are listening on a phone. I know this because I see the analytics, but wherever you are, just hit subscribe, and that's all you have to do. That would be such a huge benefit to me, and I would just appreciate it so much. So go do that real fast before you even listen to the episode, and then come back and join us because I have a great guest on for you today. But go click that subscribe button on Apple Podcasts or in Spotify, wherever you are. Click on that subscribe button. Please. I would really appreciate it. It would help me so much, and I would be so appreciative. Okay. Assuming you did that and paused this, and now you're back, I have a great guest for you. This is on the show today. I have Dan Barrett. Dan Barrett is the founder of AdWords Nerds. It is a company that specializes in working with real estate investors. They don't work with anybody else. They work only with real estate investors to help you get your Google AdWords out there, to help you advertise on Facebook, on YouTube, on TikTok. They do it all. It's a one-stop shop for online advertising. And these guys have been doing it for over a decade now. They are really, really great at what they do. They also have a podcast, by the way, called the REI Marketing Nerds Podcast. Dan is a fun guy. I've known him for a long time. I always enjoy talking to him. I've had plenty of conversations with him off the air, and I just have a blast every time I talk to him. And I think that comes through. He's a very, very fun guy. But he's also a super smart guy, and that will absolutely come through in this episode because he lays it out there, what he thinks is going on in the market, what he thinks is going on with ads, and how ads are successful or not successful, the changes that he's seen over the last few years, the changes he expects to see coming in online ads, just a wealth of knowledge, and I'm excited to have him on the show. So without any further ado, I give you Dan Barrett of AdWords Nerds. Hey, Dan, man, thanks for doing this. I appreciate you being on the show. It's good to talk to you. I hope you've been well.
Yeah, man. Thank you for having me. First of all, I'm super pumped to jump in. And yeah, thank you for asking. Things have been very well. I was going to say very good. It's been, so I'll put it this way. I think most people listening to this probably had like a relatively challenging 2 to 3 year last
Why? What's been going on? I don't know.
Yeah,
what's happened?
I guess it's just
something on your end, something personal, something very specific to you.
Something. not so much personal as like global, but also personal,
Something big's been happening. I don't watch the news. You got to excuse me. I don't know what's happening.
Yeah. Okay. It's been a wild few years, man. And I feel like, in some ways I have grown more as a person and a business owner, particularly in the last 3 years than I did in the entire 10 years prior. So that's been awesome. And things are great, but I would be lying if I just said everything's peachy keen, right? It's been it was a challenging few years,
for sure.
But yeah, you learn lessons, and that's what life's all about, at least for me.
All right. So other than the bio, which was pretty quick and kind of surface level, let's frame a little bit who you are. So everyone knows, I think, at this point, if you've been listening since the top of the show, that Dan runs a marketing agency. He does PPC for real estate investors, very specific, which is really, really cool. But is that did you come out of the womb like PPC ready to go, or did you have a career before this, or what did you do prior to catering to real estate investors in this world?
Yes. Well, like my father before me and his father before him.
No line of internet marketers.
Yeah, I took a weird route to get where I'm at. So like you said, marketing agency, specifically real estate investors, specifically motivated seller leads. That's what we do and have done for about a decade now. But the way I got to that, so originally I was looking to become a teacher. I wanted to teach history. So I went to college. I got my master's degree in history, got a master's degree in education. I was doing student teaching. And at some point, I just kind of realized teachers don't make a lot of money. And I was looking for ways to make some extra cash. So I started freelancing.
Okay.
And the reason I was able to start freelancing and doing some online marketing work was during that whole early period when I was in college and high school, started doing my student teaching and stuff. I was also in bands. So more people know me as a musician than know me as a marketer, right?
Oh my God.
So I was doing bands and touring around and crappy buses and that kind of thing. And someone always needed to be the guy that got the shirts printed or handled the cash or, made the website. Yeah. And I just kind of always been that guy. And so I'd sort of learned to do some very early web design and learn my way around WordPress and learned SEO. And this was all just in service of, hey, we're going to play a show this weekend. We need people to know about it. So when time came to start freelancing, I was doing a little bit of SEO, a little bit of web design, just working with local businesses. And very quickly found out that, I'm making more money freelancing than I probably will 6 years into a full-time teaching position. Wow. And history teaching at the time it was hard to find jobs doing it, right? So I decided to go full-time freelance and spent a couple years just working with kind of anybody, local businesses, pizza parlors, ambulance companies, whoever. And I ended up picking up a client who was a real estate investor who I still talk to this day. It was this guy, Dan Schwartz, who went on to start Investor Fuse. So at the time, he was just an investor over in Baltimore. And we were similar age. We both liked music. And so we just hit it off, right? Mm-hmm. And he was my entry point into investing because I knew nothing about it. And in fact, I always joke that, we had this whole conversation where he's saying, I buy houses and then I rehab them and I sell them for profit. And I was like, oh, great. Geez, you must have a lot of cash on hand. And he was like, oh, I don't use any of my own money. And I just remember thinking oh, this is illegal. I get it. Okay, cool.
My friend's a criminal. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. All sounded very strange, right? And so, I ended up working with him and building out these strategies and campaigns that did really well for him. And, kind of had that experience. And then I knew I needed to pick a target market. I knew from the beginning, I wanted to be the best in the world at something. But I also knew I don't know if people are watching the video right now, but if you look at me, I don't look like much, right? So it's I'm not going to be a basketball player, a baseball player, or whatever. I probably need to narrow my focus if I really want to be the best at anything. So I was I know I want to pick a really specific target market. And I kind of needed a forcing function to make me make that decision because I was indecisive. So I spent 10 grand on a ticket to a Tony Robbins Business Mastery event because I had never done anything like that before in my life. I put it on a credit card. It was more money than I'd spent on anything. And I went down to the event and I sat all the way in the back row. And because I didn't want to dance or get picked on or whatever, I didn't know what was going to happen. Right? I was like, I don't know what's going to happen. So I sat all the way in the back and I ended up sitting next to Glenn and Amber Schwarm, who are real estate investors in upstate New York, still amazing investors, trainers to this day. And having the conversation, what do you do? And I was explaining why I was there. And they were like, well, you should work with us because we need leads all the time. And I just said, oh, all right, that's my target market. And basically from that point on, we have been 100% focused on just motivated seller leads. It's expanded from Google to do Facebook and SEO and YouTube. And, now I'm learning TikTok and all this stuff. But that was always the focus, is just be the best at this one lead type for this one type of client. And it's been great. I mean, that was so early in the process. I remember having conversations with investors when I started that what it started with, well, here's what Google ads are, because there's not that many people were doing them back then. Right. So we were lucky enough to be early and to kind of set a foundation as we're the ones who do this. And it's been amazing, man. It's been such a fun ride. It's never boring. It never stays the same. It's always something different every day. And that's why I love it. Yeah,
that's huge. You mentioned at the top here that it's been a wild ride. And I'm just wondering, when COVID hit, I would have guessed, if you hadn't said that, I would have guessed your business started booming when COVID was a good thing for your business. Obviously, it was a bad thing globally, but it was a good thing for your business because it seems like, and I'll put myself in this category, online leads skyrocketed because people were sitting at home. They couldn't go anywhere. They couldn't go to work. And a lot of people were freaking out. They're going to lose their house because they're in the service industry, for example, and everything's shut down. It's like, how do I sell my house fast, right? Is that true, or was it difficult during that time for your business?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's interesting, right? Because it's hard now from the perspective of whatever year this is, 2022, whatever year this is, 2022, took me a second to look back and really remember. And I was thinking about this recently. It's like Kobe Bryant died at the beginning of 2020. That was what was, the big thing. Yep. And I still remember my birthday is in March, and I had a 40th birthday planned, and we were going to have a big party or whatever, and we had to cancel it. Right? It was right at the beginning of when people started to be like, "Oh, this is a thing," and we don't know what it is, right? We didn't know what it is. And then you go through the whole period where you can't buy toilet paper, right? Remember, it was you couldn't buy toilet paper, right? It's all this. I
hoarded toilet paper. I'm just going to say it right. I got to get it out. It's been on my chest for 2 years. I hoarded toilet paper.
I wish I had been smart enough to hoard toilet paper. I bought a 10-pound bag of oatmeal because I was like, I don't know what's going to happen. We're still going through it. My kids are like, I hate oatmeal. They will not eat it anymore. It's terrible. So it's at that time, I just had zero idea what to expect. And so it was the first time that a real big event, big economic event was occurring when I was self-employed and I had kids.
Yeah.
Because I was sort of in business around 2008 or sort of doing stuff around 2008, but I didn't have kids. So to me, it was emotionally this moment where I suddenly realized I have 7 people that rely on me to feed their families. And I got to feed my family.
Yeah.
And so I always say I'm 42 now, but I feel like that was the moment I really became an adult. I was I am the man of the house, metaphorically. Right.
Yeah.
And so what ended up happening was there was a period of real drop-off where people just sat on their money for a little while. And that meant sellers, and meant buyers, and that meant investors, right? I think everybody was holding their breath. What ended up happening was there was a very sharp increase shortly after that, right? And so what that ended up being a very strong year, right? But then what ended up happening to us personally was in 2021, then we saw a retraction in terms of my personal business, right?
Gotcha.
Now, that ended up not being such a big deal because I became much more financially disciplined and conservative in many ways through the emotional experience of 2020, which was actually financially better than 2021, but it was like flipped. Like 2021, I kind of felt like I got this. In 2020, it was like, who knows what's going to happen, right?
Yeah.
In Google, there was this really interesting curve where it went down real sharply and then came shooting up. And then by the end of 2020, the number I always remember was at the beginning of the year. So the beginning of 2020, national average conversion rate, which for folks who don't do this kind of stuff, right? It's the percentage of people that land on your website that end up becoming a lead. So if they call you, they fill out a form, they email you, that's a conversion. So a conversion rate of 10% would mean for every 100 people that land on your website, 10 of them become a lead, right? Yeah. National average conversion rate for investors at the beginning of 2020 was 6%. At the end of 2020, it was 1.5%. So you saw a dip, a rise, and then a crater at the end of the year, right? And so it was a combination of things. It's been weird to come back. You see a lot of hyper competition now. You see price inflation. You saw, now they're out of the game, but it was like Zillow came into the instant offers kind of thing. It was like just all this stuff happening at the exact same time. iOS put out an update that broke cookie-based tracking in Facebook ads. You saw huge rises and then drops in the amount of people searching online. You saw Opendoor and OfferPad get real major brand traction for the first time. Google moved to algorithmic bidding structures for the first time. It was like all these changes happened in like a 2-year period. And so there's been more volatility in that online marketing space than I've ever seen in my entire life. And in some ways that's exciting. In some ways it's terrifying, right? We've had some clients make more money from less leads than they've ever made before, right? So for a while, the spreads were huge. So then the cost per deal acquisition, it seemed like everything is going wild. And now it feels, I don't know about you, I'd actually be curious to hear your take on it. I feel it's not so much that this is what's actually happening in the market, but I feel like what I hear as common knowledge, meaning like, that everybody else knows, right? So it's not even like what's necessarily reality, but what we all think everybody else thinks is that something's going to happen in the market. There's a tightening in the market. The market is slowing down now. Those years are behind us. And that's kind of led to a little bit of a stepping back, and things seem to be kind of cooling off a little bit. I'm curious if that's your take on it as well.
Yeah. Back in 2020, right, like probably 6 months into the pandemic, my bold prediction was within a year, prices will be dropping again. And I was wrong. It kept going, right? To the tune that I even sold my house in 2020 in the summer, because I was like, this is insane spiking. I can't imagine this is sustainable. Yeah. People are freaking out. This is a panic. And so I sold my house and made quite a bit of money actually on it. And then a year later, I could have made double what I made when I sold it. Like that's how fast it kept going up. But that's not what you asked. So I think that matter of fact, I just recently interviewed the data and analytics vice president, director, something for BiggerPockets, the guy who runs all their analytics. And I asked him the same question. And the thought there was, and I agreed with him, but I like hearing someone smart agree with me, then I know I'm onto something, that it is absolutely not going to keep going up. By the end of the year, that's very likely prices will level off, cool off a little bit, maybe even dip a little bit. I don't think we're going to see what we saw in 2008. There's absolutely no basis for anyone thinking that's going to happen. But with interest rates going up and people's buying power going down, it's going to naturally drive prices down a little, or at least level them off, right? So we're going to see it cooling off a little bit. But what I think, when prices are, so I do mostly wholesaling. Very little flipping, but I do mostly wholesaling. So when prices are soaring like this, in theory, that makes my job very difficult, because everyone with the crappiest house, the dumpster fire houses, think that they can sell for top of the market. Like everyone is so optimistic about their chances of selling for a top dollar. When prices they don't even have to go down, honestly, because the media is so good at scaring the bejesus out of everyone that when prices start leveling, they're going to scream, the sky's falling. That's just what they do, right? Because to say house prices growth has diminished and it's leveling off, but don't worry, it'll eventually, they don't do that, right? They go, it's either house prices are going through the roof or they're bottoming out. So when things start leveling off, I anticipate the media will scare everyone. And when they start scaring everyone, because they're trying to create more viewers, or if the market actually really does start to tank, either way, when people start thinking that their house is going to lose value, that's when my job as a wholesaler becomes easy. I just start scooping up houses that people are thinking they have to dump or they're going to continue to lose equity and I need to do it now. And you barely have to even talk them into it because they're just dying to sell their house. I think that there's going to be some of that. But yeah, I do think house prices are going to at least level off, at least. Like I look at the real estate market like a pendulum of a clock, right? Mm-hmm. It goes one way, it always does, but it always goes back the other way to some extent. If you look at real estate from like a 30,000 foot view, you just see a 45-degree angle going up, for like the last 100 years or 100, whatever. But if you zoom in on a decade to decade by basis, you just see it going up and down, basically, right? So it goes up and down about every decade or so, but in the long term, it always goes up. So it will go down. Like we will probably see, like I just bought a house in September. That's when I just bought the house that I'm in. It's my forever house. Bought it in September because I was sick of waiting for the prices to go down. I sold high and I was going to buy low, and then I just got too impatient. So I bought a house. My house has gone up in value by $100,000 since September. That's just stupid. That's an insane, and it's not a $10 million house where it's like a 10%, where it's like this little, it's a big increase, and it's like, it just can't keep going. It's, you can't throw a ball in the air and expect it to stay up there forever. If it stays up for a couple of minutes, you're pretty freaked out, but it's going to come back down eventually. And I think that's same thing we're going to have here. Prices are going to level off, but if you just watch the news and you don't really pay attention to facts, you're going to think that your house is losing value fast, and probably it'll just level off and dip a teeny bit, probably.
I mean, it's fascinating, right? Because so real estate is a market, obviously. Mm-hmm. Yep. Stock market's a market. Google ads are a market. It's a marketplace like any other. It's an auction system, and all markets operate on similar dynamics, right? And when you have intelligent players, you have people that have access to information, ultimately what playing the market becomes is not playing the market itself, but playing the other people playing the market.
Yeah.
So it ends up being like, not even what do I think the market is really going to do? It's what do I think other people think the market is going to do, right? Yep. And one of the reasons I'm like interested in crypto, and not because I'm a big crypto investor. I'm not. I literally have like a tiny amount that I bought for fun, and that's it. But I love watching it because you don't get to see the birth of a new market or the birth of a giant nothing burger, whatever it is, you just don't get to see this kind of thing happen all that often.
Yep.
And it's such a fascinating look into human psychology, right? Because crypto prices are, at least right now, purely speculative. So it's only driven essentially by what everybody else thinks is going to happen.
Yep.
And so, yeah, I mean, I think what's interesting to me, and so when we think about strategy for AdWords Nerds as an agency or strategy for our clients as investors, right? I think about, well, okay, not just what is the cost going to be in this market, but what's it going to do over time? And what do I think other investors are going to do over time? And, I think about stuff like, well, we have friends here in West Hartford, Connecticut, where we live, and they need to put their house on the market. They need to move quickly, right? And I'm like, hey, you're a motivated seller. I know some people, but but they're putting it on the market.
Yeah.
They put it on the market because everyone told them it's going to sell like that. Someone's going to walk in and give you cash 2 days after you put it on the market.
Yeah.
But they've had like 10 showings and no one's made an offer yet. And now they're sweating. And it's been like a week.
Yeah.
But it's because they had a certain expectation, right?
Yep.
And I'm like, it's going to be fine. But it's so fascinating to watch people's psychology and how that interacts with the underlying economics and stuff. This is why I like this stuff, because, I was saying this earlier, like anything you look at, whether it's real estate or AdWords or Google Ads or anything, it's a microcosm of everything. And so if you scratch the surface a little bit, you get psychology and economics and systems theory, and you get all sorts of cool stuff to nerd out on. But I appreciate that seems to be what I'm hearing as well. So it'll be interesting to see what actually happens.
Yeah, it's funny. I had this conversation with my dad a few weeks back. He's looking for a house. He's been looking for a while, and he was frustrated. He's like, houses are going for insane prices. They're going for more than they're worth. And I said, no, they're not. They're going for what they're worth. Whatever someone will pay is what it's worth. And he said, no, I disagree. He said, you get this house that's worth, it's only worth $200,000, but it's for sale for $300,000, and the bank will only loan $250,000. And so people are bringing $50,000 to the table. He said, so it's not worth $300,000. And I said, no, it is, because it's selling, and whatever it sells for is what it's worth right now. It just is. Like, he's thinking of what it was worth a decade ago, and I get that, but it's like everything is worth, it's all perception. Like you said, a house is worth what someone is willing to pay. And if someone wants to bring $100,000 to the table and buy it, that house just became worth that, Well,
so exploiting the difference between the underlying, whatever you want to call the inherent economic value, and the perceived value is where profit lives. That's where all profit lives. Right? Like if everybody just paid exactly like whatever revenue something could produce, if that's just how we all calculated it, there's no profit in anything. And so if you're an investor, or you're a marketer, or you're investing in crypto, it is all about saying there's some kind of inherent value that something's going to return to, and the current perceived value is either higher or lower than that. And how do I take advantage of that fact? Right. So it's interesting, man. It makes the world go round.
Totally.
And hopefully people can take advantage of that stuff and use mental models and use rational thinking and use, like you said, data, and like sort of try to come to their own conclusions about where the rest of society is wrong. Because where society is wrong and you are right, that's where a fortune's there to be made, So.
Totally. Now, you mentioned, and this was new since maybe we talked last. I mean, anyway, it's probably not new to you, but it's new since you and I had a conversation. I knew you did Google AdWords, but you're doing Facebook now and YouTube. Like, you're literally, your expertise is in all of these areas that have to be so frustrating, because they can just change their rules on a whim, it seems, right? So it's bad enough to be dealing with Google. Now you're dealing with Facebook. When in your business, do you just as a service go, we'll do them all for you? Or do people is it like a la carte? Like, I want Google, I don't want Facebook, I want YouTube, but I don't want, TikTok. Like, how does that work for you guys?
Yeah. So the service side, for all the PPC platforms, we just do for a single flat fee. Okay. Because this kind of gets to that issue where there is no one size fits all strategy that makes sense for every investor, right? Like, everybody wants the silver bullet that's always going to work, and it just doesn't exist. And actually, it's one of the main things. I actually just went through the hiring process, hiring people for our team, hiring new managers for the first time in a while. And in the interview process, I would ask them questions like, okay, this client's conversion rate is down 10%. What do you do about it? And the more certain they got, the more wary I became. Because the trick about that question is, before I can answer that question, I need to know about the client. What's their budget? What can they afford to spend? For this case, it's like, what's your close rate? What's your market look like? What's your risk tolerance, right? All these things are important, because all solutions and all situations are contextual. Right? It all depends on the context. So for us, the reason that we ended up going multi-channel sort of not just doing Google ads, but doing Bing and YouTube and, SEO and Facebook and all this stuff. It's not because I wanted to necessarily, because it massively increases the complexity of my business, right?
For sure.
So from a purely, capitalist pig standpoint, like I would rather just have the simplest possible thing. But what ended up happening was we realized, because every individual channel, if you're all in Google ads, you're all in direct mail, you're all in bandit signs, right? All your eggs are in that basket.
Yep.
There is a huge amount of risk that you take on if your business depends on it.
Yeah.
And this was a lesson like I learned personally, because early in our agency, our primary mode for getting new clients was Facebook, right? So we did Google ads for clients, but Facebook was where we found investors, right? And this is sort of the golden age of Facebook advertising.
Yep.
There's a point at which I was getting a 15 times return on every dollar I spent in Facebook. I literally could not spend enough money in Facebook. They wouldn't let me. They like capped me out.
Wow.
And so we just did that all day, every day, right? And then it just stopped working. And because I hadn't built multiple channels, or, if I had, I'd kind of let them go by the wayside.
Yeah.
That had a huge impact on us. And I was like, right, I realize this now. I have given Mark Zuckerberg a controlling stake in my company's future, right?
Yeah, that's funny.
Nothing against Mark. I'm sure I'd actually be richer if I could literally do that. But I wasn't comfortable with that. And we realized
the problem is you gave him a stake in your company, but he doesn't know it. So he has no interest.
He has no idea that exists, right? So it's like, so we just realized it's the exact same thing for clients. It's for our clients, right? Yeah. And ultimately, what we're trying to do is build resilience into clients, right? And so there's a certain amount of volatility I will accept in any given channel and across all those channels for a given client. But we want to create some kind of stability and certainty, right? You need some of that.
Yeah.
Volatility is not bad. You're back to the investing idea, right? If prices were not volatile at all, you could not make a profit. A price has to go up and down in order for you to benefit from that, buy low, sell high, right? If there's no volatility, there's no buy high or low to buy at, right?
Right.
So you need volatility in order to encourage evolution, adaptation, change. All resilient systems have some volatility in it. This is the whole anti-fragile idea, from Nicholas Taleb. But at the same time, if I say, you're going to do, it's going to be great, but you're going to get 100 deals in 1 month and then nothing for the entire rest of the year, or it's going to be on, off, that's not great for people either. So you need to strike a balance. And so if you have multiple channels of marketing going simultaneously, if one's up, the other can be down, right? If one turns off, you can turn something else up. And so it just became kind of core to our business model. Not every client wants to do that or has the budget to do that, but we really felt like ethically, we needed the capability of doing that, right? Yeah. And for the stuff that we don't do, I just refer people out to other agencies that I like, right? So it's been an interesting kind of process to get there, because I'm a Google Ads guy. That's my expertise. So part of it was expanding beyond just the stuff that I really know how to do. Right. But I've been very fortunate in the fact that I've been able to hire really great people who have really built out our systems and sort of really built on the stuff that originally I put there. So it's been interesting. We'll put it that way.
For the people that you work with, and I know that everyone's different, but if you had to try to high level this a little bit, if you're working with 100 people and each of them get 100 deals in a year from working with you, approximately what percentage of those are from Google and what percentage are from Facebook, for example?
Yeah, so our data set will skew heavily towards Google, because, and I will say this, quite frankly, I lead with this with any client conversation, which is I am extremely biased, whether I realize it or not. All right. My company is called AdWords Nerds, right? I didn't call it a bunch of stuff nerds. Yeah. It's AdWords Nerds. That's my business, what I'm good at.
Did you A/B test a bunch of stuff, nerds? Because that sounds hot. I wish
because there's all this trouble with Google. They don't like it that we're called AdWords Nerds.
Really?
Yeah, I can't sign up for like a Google Calendar account because they're like, nope. But in any case, like, so I am heavily biased, and it as a function of that, because Google is the most reliable, best cost per deal acquisition, and highest ROI channel we run. Now, is that because it's that way? Or is that because that's just what I'm best at? And in many ways, my company is a reflection of me. Yeah. In so many ways, our company culture is sort of filtered through that capacity that has just become that way, right? So a good example is Kylie over at Silverstream Marketing. They're Facebook people. They do Facebook ads for investors. We do too. Technically, they're our competitors. But Facebook is what they do primarily. It's what they're best at, right? And I'm sure if you ask them, they'll be like, Facebook is by far the best ROI marketing channel we do. Yeah. And it's like, for my money personally, if you're doing 100 deals, probably 80 of them are coming from Google. Okay. Right. Facebook tends to be, in my experience, and again, just my experience, right? It's extremely high volume. So there's a very high lead volume, low lead cost, and that correlates with a relatively low close rate, right? Yeah. Your mileage may vary, but for me, for our money, that's what's proven out over the last couple of years.
Gotcha. What are your thoughts? And I know it's your business, right? And you run this agency, but still, I'm going to ask because I'm interested in your answer to this. What do you think the future of pay-per-click or Facebook ads, what do you think that looks like? Do you expect it to continue to be strong? Do you think there's any factors that are going to cause it serious trouble going forward? Like, what is your outlook on that?
Yeah, it's fascinating, right? Because this is, I think this right now is a period of absolutely massive transition in the online advertising space, on multiple levels simultaneously, right? Because for one, I think Facebook is, if not dead in the water, they are bleeding out, and they are having massive trouble getting back to where they were, right? And the online advertising has been split between Google and Facebook basically since they've been both advertising, right? Yep. And so I think that is massive transition number one. What steps in to fill that hole? TikTok is very much trying. And I will tell you that in the groups that I'm in, which are other agency owners, right? So digital media owners, people who do online advertising for a profession, what they are talking about is TikTok ads. That's what they are talking about. The word there is, hey, if you have a problem on TikTok, you can call someone and talk to a real human being right away, and they'll help you. Facebook, they don't care if you live or die. You just hit the road, right? I view that as, I think I can't remember. It's Paul Graham or whatever. It's like a Silicon Valley investor guy who always says, what the nerds do on the weekends now is what the future is going to be in 5 years. Yeah. That to me feels like that kind of thing. The fact that so many agency owners are migrating away from Facebook and sort of seeing it as broken, I think that's a really massive transition. The other transition that's happening right now is a real push towards machine learning and artificial intelligence as the sort of underlying engine of what makes things happen. When I started with Google Ads was, I always liken it to Microsoft Flight Simulator. If anybody's remembers Microsoft Flight Simulator, you get in, it looks like a plane. It's a video game, right? It's got a million tiny dials, a million little buttons, and each button does the real thing. And you got to really, the instruction manual is like this big, right? It's a big, complicated thing built by engineers. And the thing about that kind of system is it requires human control. It requires human control, right? Google figured out the exact same thing that airlines figured out, which is that flights get safer when you remove control from the human being. Not all control, but a whole bunch of it, right? Much of the flight process in terms of like flying an actual plane can be automated, computerized, centrally controlled, et cetera. Google Ads realized the same thing. Most people, when they set up a Google Ads account, what they did was set it and then forget it and then get poor results and stop advertising. That's bad for Google.
Yeah.
So what they realized was, for most people, if you give them a relatively simplified interface and you say, let us handle it, we will set your bids, we will choose your keywords, we will even build your ad, they will write your ad for you if you want. They will test the ads, all that you can just do automatically, right? Yeah. They realized that on average, people would get better results that way. And so for the longest time, none of that worked for investors. This has been in the works for a long time, but none of it ever worked for investors, because the thing about investors is that motivated sellers are a fairly tiny slice of any market. And so you never got a ton of traffic, even with a really good campaign. Yeah. It's not like if you're selling sneakers on an e-commerce store and you're getting thousands of clicks a day, right? It was never like that for us. And so that kind of AI, machine learning stuff, it never worked super well because the data sets were always small and the computer just couldn't learn. You know, I would always joke, like, computer no learn good. It couldn't extrapolate out from like small data set, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Basically, since 2020, that has completely done a 180. And instead, what's happened is, 2020 going into 2021 was the very first time in our internal tests that a Google bidding algorithm consistently and routinely outperformed a human manager, like managing every individual bid.
This sounds horrible for you, Dan. I'm worried. Go ahead.
Right? Yeah.
I'm waiting for the end of this story.
Well, and so I would always say, like, at some point, what ended up happening was managing ads became less like putting stuff in a spreadsheet, Microsoft Flight Simulator. Now what it is like large animal training. I am training an elephant. The elephant can kill me if it wants. It can crush me. Most of the days it doesn't. Right. But I have to feed it and train it. I'm trying to get it to do tricks. And there's a way we're trying to do that. So what my team studies now, like, I'm about to do a week-long training with new PPC managers. I am spending 3 out of our 5 days. I'm not even talking about ads. All I'm talking about is complexity theory, understanding uncertainty, how to test in situations where you can't determine a cause and effect relationship between what you did and what happened, how to run experiments in a way where your data is valuable, how to aggregate data across different clients. Like, it is about pattern matching on a level that I've never experienced, right? It's a different game. And the thing I notice is that when I look at other ad managers, or look at other agencies, or even investors, right, who are doing their own stuff, I'm just like, oh, you don't see that yet. We're all playing a different game and nobody told you, right? Yeah. So I will see people float the same stuff. It's like stuff that literally I made 6 years ago. And people will be like, here's what we're going to do. And I'd be like, great. That doesn't work now, right? Like, but no one told me. Yeah. So it's, it's funny because in the beginning, I very much had the same thing. I was like, Google is trying to remove the agency. They're trying to remove the agency from the equation. That's bad for us. Over time, I've actually realized that it's a huge opportunity because being able to successfully adapt to change, the very first step of that is knowing that change is happening.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think, ironically, you would think online marketing it should be fast pivot and all this stuff. And it isn't. It's actually fairly slow to wake up and change. And if anything, we've seen client results like massively improve. But it's massively improved because I threw away every best practice that I had written, all the best practices, the stuff that I had codified. The stuff that was in this industry that basically came from the stuff that I taught, we threw it all out and we're like, let's start over. Wow. And that's been the best thing that ever happened to us, right? So it's a fun time to be doing this work. It's a challenging time to be doing this work, but I wake up every day excited and fascinated about what's happening. Right. So awesome. It's tough, but it's fun. What can I say?
It's not that different from real estate investing itself. You have to, the best way to deal with the changing markets is you have to understand the markets are changing, change your approach. You got to be able to throw out some stuff that worked 2 years ago when the market was totally different. So it's very relatable in that way. And I know we talked a little bit before we went live here about how you kind of run your business. And I know the biggest part of your business is like done for you. I tell people all the time, I mean, just to be totally transparent, I don't think a real estate investor, business owners' highest and best use of their time is becoming an AdWords specialist, expert, whatever you want to call it. Like, we should be finding deals, raising money, selling properties, flipping properties. Like that's what we do. That's what we're great at. And I have always been very, very strong in telling people, hire it out, hire someone who does this all the time. They know what they're doing. You don't become an expert on tuning up cars because your car needs a tune up. Like, pay someone to do it. It's not your best use of time. Right. So how does it work? How can people get a hold of you if they go, this guy is beyond brilliant and I want to be in his world and I want him to help me with what I'm doing because I need more leads from motivated sellers, which we always do. That's the great thing about your line of work is I started in 2008 real estate. And in 2008, the big talk was we need more leads. And in 2022, the big talk is we need more leads. And every year in between, everyone's asking me, how do I get more leads? Right. So it's never, it's just one of those things that I think will always be a reality. People are looking for more and better leads. And I think the funny thing is about real estate is physical like marketing of letters and cards and things is still alive and strong, but God knows how. It's such an antiquated thing, and it's hard to believe that you can send someone a letter and you can get a lead. But it seems to me that as people age and people who grew up on computers, I've always said this, and I'm sure you have similar thoughts, but maybe you don't. People who grew up on computers, as we get older, we're more and more going online to look for solutions for things. Like when I want to learn how to do something, like I don't go get an encyclopedia. My dad does. I don't. I go to YouTube, right? So I think that means that this part of the industry and your part of the industry has probably got a heck of a great future because it seems like you're going to have more and more people online doing these things. But how can people, that was a long way of asking how you get into your world. How can people find you and get a hold of you?
Yeah. So best place is AdWordsNerds.com. So AdWords Nerds.com, which is the website. You can find all sorts of stuff there. We blog a lot. Like I just recently did, I think it's like a 30,000 word research project on open doors, online marketing. You search for AdWords Nerds Open Door, you'll find that. I wrote 40,000 word ultimate guide to PPC for real estate investors, basically my entire philosophy of PPC in a single article. So there's a lot of stuff there. But I've been on YouTube as well. I have a bunch of stuff on YouTube. You can find me there if you search for AdWords Nerds. And I have a podcast called REI Marketing Nerds. I'm all over the place, man. I've been quiet for a little while because I have been, when we decided we were going to bring on more managers, I decided to really double down and say, okay, what do I believe about how this should be done? What is important now? How do I codify this in a way I can give it to someone new? Right. So this process is finishing up. The training process for them has been finishing up. It's been awesome. And I'm about to go full on ham online, just like posting stuff, because I have so many thoughts about this industry. So yeah, I would love for people to just, jump in anywhere is convenient for them. Okay. And, I just love talking about this stuff. So
totally, man. We're going to have all those things you just mentioned. We'll throw on all your social handles and stuff. If people want to find you there, I'm sure they can get to you at some point that way. Man, it's been fun catching up with you again, Dan. I really love talking to you all the time. We talked for probably 10 or 15 minutes before we even went live, and I could have kept going, but I want to respect your time here. But thanks for doing this. And if people want to get a hold of you, AdWordsNerds.com, go there and check it out. And it's been a pleasure, man. Thanks for being on with me. I appreciate it.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, man. This was an absolute blast.
Awesome, man. All right, well, we'll talk to you soon. All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed that. Dan's a smart guy. He knows what he's talking about when it comes to PPC. Trust me, he is the authority in that. area. He is someone that I have been recommending for years because I just know, and you could tell when you hear this episode, he's just a smart guy. He knows what he's talking about. He's been doing it a long time. Very genuine guy too, and I consider him a friend. So I am really excited that I had him on the show for you guys. You could benefit from that knowledge. Go check him out. Go to AdWordsNerds.com and see if they can help you, because if you're getting into PPC or if you haven't gotten into it yet, but you want to get into it, that's the first call I would make, the first place I would go. So go and check them out. Guys, get out there and make it happen. Make today the best day. We'll talk to you next time.